Hey everybody, this is Kevin, Briana, and Alexa, and we're here today to talk to you about a book by Barbara Ehrenreich called Nickel and Dimed. So when discussing poverty in America today, we often hear that if you just work hard, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and don't spend too much money on frivolous things, that you'll be able to succeed. And maybe not be able to buy a fancy house or a fast car, but you'll at least be able to pay your bills. There's no excuse to go into debt or become homeless. So when discussing this issue with her editor back in 1996, a journalist by the name of Barbara Ehrenreich said that somebody should really go out and test this theory and see that if somebody can go out to a random town in America, get an entry-level job and work full-time, that they should be able to afford their bills. So her editor suggested that she be the person to do that. And so she set out after the passing of the 1996 Welfare Reform Act by the Clinton administration, which severely hindered welfare benefits, especially for the working poor. And she set out to test this theory. So the idea was that Ehrenreich would set out to a few different locations for any given set of time, get an entry-level job, work full-time, and see if she could afford her rent by the end of that month. So she really was testing the American dream as it boils down for most of us. She didn't quite think she would succeed, but she still set out to work her hardest and really decide that if she, a PhD graduate, someone who came from a hardworking family background with a good set of skills, if she can be able to do it, she should be able to succeed where some others might have failed. So for the next few minutes, Briana, Alexa, and myself will be discussing how Ehrenreich approached this experiment, the obstacles she faced, the things she learned, and the underlying reasons that affected whether or not she could succeed. So Alexa, if you want to start us off.
Yes. As you said, Kevin, Ehrenreich in her time as a journalist spoke with her newspaper editor about the new Welfare Reform Act, which effectively removes working Americans from public assistance. Based on their assertion of working full-time, wasn't going to be enough to pay the bills. She decides to take this theory, choosing several locations about the country to move to, and she applied for entry-level jobs, often minimum wage. And she wanted to see if she could make enough money to afford her rent for the following month, with the idea that a minimum wage work will be enough for a modest apartment rental in anywhere in the country. On her journey, she discovered that a low-wage employees often go without health insurance, and as I've previously mentioned, wasn't going to be enough to pay her rent for a full month. She found out that it's very hard physically and physiologically for employees, and this was only considering that she was going to be making money only to sustain herself and not a whole family. Meaning that a single mother of 3 kids would have to work at least 3 jobs to sustain her family. As a PhD grad, she believed that her intelligence and work drive to handle a low-skilled job would help her pay her rent. But she concluded that a working full-time job was not enough, especially with the wages as low as they are. This gives us a clear example of how families of low income usually struggle to have a good life due to having to work multiple jobs to sustain their families and give them a good life. Not to mention how this affects kids spending quality time with their parents and in many other factors.
That's true. The hurdles that Ehrenreich faced on her experiment is the same real hurdles that the working poor face today, the same that they've faced for generations, whether it just be something as simple as low wages, coupled with no real benefits. Benefits have been going down for the average worker for 50, 60 years now. poor working conditions, especially for manual labor jobs, which is the bulk of the working poor employment, and hostile management. As I'm sure everybody here has had a job and everybody's had a boss that they didn't really get along with, or customers that have been rude. This is not something unique to the working poor, but there's this idea that working class poor people deserve our scorn because they have unskilled jobs. And this myth is something that Ehrenreich really found pervasive in her experiment. So Brianna, you want to talk to some more about that?
Yes. So as Ehrenreich went on, as she was going through her journaling, looking at on the minimum wage, she worked 3 different jobs, which is as a maid, a waitress, and a nurse at a nursing home. And with these jobs, they have stated that you don't need any skills going in, but that is definitely untrue. You do need some type of skills going into these jobs. And it also demands a lot of physical demands on you. So even for her coworkers, they weren't in the best condition because they would also have to learn how to do their job correctly. And with them doing a lot, it takes a lot physically on their bodies. And even while they're working minimum wage, it still doesn't cover their total rent of where they need to be because some would be living inside of their vehicles. And also, as Kevin had said, their boss, the boss of Ehrenreich, was not always the best of bosses, and it was he was very strict on her during these jobs and wanted everything to be perfectly precise. And with that, the Bureau of Labor Statistics states every minimum wage worker is a single mother well past 13 years. And with this, the labor hours will be very hard and with little to no breaks, which will make the demand even more harder on them. And as BL also is, their data that they hold for the population in highly populated areas are 90% of the time correct, but as it goes to low populated areas, the data is not correct at all. And here in Florida, the minimum wage went up by 10 cents, and people that are tipped on the jobs also went up by 10 cents, but it still is not enough to be considered minimum wage and to get rent paid for people.
I agree. And despite all these obstacles that Ehrenreich faced, the hostile bosses, the low wages, the desperate coworkers, she still had optimism that the next town, the next iteration of her experiment, she'd still be able to work hard. Maybe she'll spend less on food this time or clothes, or maybe she'll get a part-time job. And each time, no matter what she tried, she still failed to make rent. And that's what it boils down to. The real crux of her book is that no matter how hard you work, you still can't afford rent if you're stuck with no high school diploma. If you're stuck working minimum wage jobs for whatever reason, there's really no escape. And it's tough because in each place she visited, she found coworkers who were working multiple jobs. She worked multiple jobs. There were folks who lived in their vehicles or in motels, and even then they struggled to pay their bills. So this isn't something that's unlucky or a one-off mistake. This is a systemic issue. The cost of living is just outpaced wages, and that's really what it boils down to. Ehrenreich tried living in hotels, motels, using food banks rather than purchasing food. None of this was enough for her to get ahead. So we really need to look at this larger picture and see what the problem really is. And it's the one that Ehrenreich outlines in her book, that working full time is not enough to pay your bills. That's not the baseline. It's what we've been led to believe, but it's not the case in reality. So as a society, we really need to think about how this reflects on our vision of the American dream and and how that reflects on where we place our priorities in society. Because if somebody working hard is still struggling, then we've placed our values in the wrong place. So I want to thank Briana and Alexa for joining me, and that'll be all from us. Thanks, guys.